Just play what I want to play tonight. What?
I was able to chime in at the very end of come in at the very end of the movie.
Yeah. There's a few people on, not a lot, but. That's a good praise song from the day. I mean, I've sung it as a praise song. You just don't play it like this.
What is that? Who is that?
And all you ever do is change the old for me. People leave their God. This is My Glorious by Delirious. You ever heard of Delirious? They were the biggest group when I was in college. Yeah, they're sort of the U2 of Christian music.
Very popular.
Well, this is one everybody remembers. This is the one everybody remembers. But there's two of them everybody remembers. The one everybody remembers is my least favorite song in the history of worship songs. Even worse than Oceans. Humbled by your majesty. You ever heard this one? Covered by your grace so free. Huh? Maybe this song's faster. Covered by the blood of the Lamb. Now I found the greatest love of all is mine, since you laid down your life, the greatest sacrifice.
You here by yourself?
No, Shane's here and she's here, Laura. My phone's going crazy. I got to replace my screen. Just playing some music in the background while we wait.
All right.
This is it. My least favorite worship song ever. I used to love it, but now I'm just like, why could you sing Of Your Love Forever? Just sing it. Okay. All right, well, it's time to start Bible study. So if you're joining us, we're going to cut the music off, and I hope you've enjoyed us talking for 5 minutes about music. We're getting ready to study the Word together. I want to welcome you today to our Bible study. I've got 6:15, so it's time to start. I want to thank you for joining us. We are going through the Bible together, book by book, studying the Word of God, studying each book of the Bible. And today we're going to be in 1 Kings. Last week we talked about 2 Samuel and how 2 Samuel sort of leads into the end of David's reign and all of David's reign, and now we're going into 1 Kings. And you know, as I thought about it, and I was sitting down and thinking about 1 Kings and 2 Kings a little bit, question sort of came to my mind is, who are the leaders that you remember the most in your childhood? Who were the leaders that you admired the most growing up when you were younger? Who were the leaders or rulers that you appreciated the most? And so let's start with that question. Who were the leaders you remember and you admired the most growing up? Or in your younger years, I guess is a better way of saying that.
Leaders?
Yeah.
What kind of leaders?
It's open-ended for a purpose.
Okay.
My daddy.
Yeah, your daddy. Okay.
Big brother.
Yeah. I was a big fan of Ronnie Reagan growing up.
Oh, you're talking about those people.
Well, I mean, they could be my pastor. Could be one. I mean, I left it open-ended for a reason, because it could be anybody. And, you know, when we talk about leaders, teachers, or people that influenced us, you know, there are different reasons why those people influenced us. So what with your daddy and your brother, what were the things about them that influenced you the most, that makes you think that they were good leaders? Or with you, who were some leaders in you, and what made them maybe a coach or somebody?
Yeah, like it was my high school basketball coach. He actually coached me from junior high till I was a senior. There's a lot of things just about his character.
Yeah.
I had several coaches in the past, and even played a little football and some different things. And
Yeah.
My basketball coach is a believer, and then there was football coaches that were believers, but they would let words fly out.
Yeah.
But my basketball coach, we always joked about it, but it was kind of cool. Because he always was like, "God bless America" or something,
Yeah.
and he would say stuff like that. But
Yeah.
I never once heard 6 years of basketball and frustrating games. Never once heard him cuss, and that's kind of one of the things that was cool. That he just had integrity in that, and some of just other things that I can kind of recall, but that's one of the main things.
Yeah. Anything else? We're talking about leaders that influenced us, and what made them influential on us in our lives.
George Washington or somebody like that for you.
Oh, that was horrible. That was a low blow, Laura.
I witnessed it.
Everybody heard it on Facebook.
Abraham Lincoln or somebody.
Well, there is one episode that I really get upset when I miss on TV. Curse of Oak Island.
Okay.
Is that the one off of Georgia?
No, it's one in Newfoundland.
Oh,
Yeah, that's the curse where they got the gold and they never quite seem to find it. They're still looking for the
Well,
gold.
there's been money found.
Okay.
There's been chests of money found. And a lot of other stuff.
Okay. Was it like a pirate haven or something? Is that what it is? I've seen
Well,
the
during those years, the 15, 16, 17, 1800s, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And there's evidence of Spain. And over 100 foot down deep in the ground, they found 2 bones. Human bones. One was from the Mideast.
Huh.
And one was from some European country, I forget which now.
Huh.
Yeah. You don't find human bones over 200 feet in the ground.
No, you don't. That's interesting.
And logs that have been humanly worked over 100 foot in the ground.
Yeah. I know for me, one of the things I appreciated about some of the leaders I had, and you're talking about your coach never cussing. My football coach never cussed. But we used to laugh because he could cuss with silence. And I remember one time I told someone, you know, you get chewed out, and the worst chewing I ever got on the football field, my coach never said a word. I missed a block, and our quarterback got blown up, and he called me to the sideline, and he grabbed me by my face mask, and he stared at me in my face, and then he turned around, and he kept dragging me behind him for like a whole series. He had his hand on my face mask, and he would just drag me behind him. And I would just stand there staring at him like this. And of course, he was probably, 5'8", 5'9". I was 6'2", and he's dragging this big old boy around. And when he got to the end, we were about to go back on offense. He pulled me in front of him. And he looked at me and he said, "Am I understood?" And I went, "Yes, sir." And I went right back out on the field, and that's all that happened. And I still remember that because he never said a word. And so we know about the good leaders. You could say, and just take some national leaders, whether it's, Ronald Reagan, if you appreciated him and his calm and his ability to handle crises, or even if you, Bill Clinton, and the fact that he could work across the aisle, and it seemed like at times he worked across the aisle. You can look at them. You may have a reason why you think those people, you see them favorably. But at the same time, if we look at them, they both had scandals that could have sidelined their presidency. I mean, whether it's the Lewinsky scandal with Clinton or the Iran-Contra with Reagan, both of them had things that happened in their presidencies that made people question them. And even today, when you get into arguments with people, they'll bring those things up as reasons why they're not great leaders. Well, 1 Kings begins with the end of the reign of Israel's first king, David, and the events that would lead to the rise and fall of Israel's kingdom. Now, we don't get to the fall to the end of 2 Kings, but we're beginning to move that way. And as we go through this, as we go through 1 and 2 Kings, we're going to find two truths that are just sort of at the top of everything, and really they're at the top of all the Old Testament. It's this: it's God's faithfulness in keeping His covenant. That God is a faithful covenant keeper. That He always keeps His promises, and then second, that Israel is a covenant breaking people, and they are always breaking their covenant. And so you're going to see this contrast played out not only between God and Israel, but you're going to see it between the nations of Judah and Israel to some extent. And you're going to see this contrast between a people who do not do what they're supposed to, and how this would usher in the end of the kingdom and the promised exile of God's people. So as we begin to think about this, I had another question I want to look at. But what has been the toughest decision you've ever had to make in your life? The toughest decision.
There's been a lot of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know which one was more so than the other.
Okay. Well, what was one of the tough decisions? I guess is a better way of saying that. Thought I heard somebody. Everybody look.
Well, last year at school and all, I hitchhiked from Brandon to home. I
Okay.
lived over there where West Terry Gardens is. That's where I raised up. And because I had trouble on the bus with this young girl. Always beating on me, slapping on me, hitting on me, bending my fingers. The only way I could stop her was grab her fingers like that and just put the hurt on her. But anyway, I finally quit. And biology school teacher picked me up in Brandon, hitchhiking home.
Mm-hmm.
She was real nice. She was real cute and everything else. She lived just up around Fanny. They pretty well known.
Yeah.
I can't even think of her name. That Bobby Collins.
Okay.
Collins lived up there. And all the way home, at that time, the women's skirts come down about the knees.
Mm-hmm.
All the way home, she kept pulling her skirt down. And I kept wondering, what's this all about? Of course, I didn't ask her.
Yeah.
But I kept wondering about all that.
Yeah.
I never said nothing.
Okay.
Just let it go.
Yeah. That's a tough decision not to say something. I know for me, marriage was a tough decision. There was a point when Christy and I first started dating where I was getting ready to decide college. And I really wanted to go to Liberty University in Virginia. We had just started dating my high school year. And I sort of knew if I was going to Liberty, that relationship was probably going to be over. And so it was a tough decision because at the end of the day, I decided to go to MC instead of Liberty and stick with her. She says it's the worst decision I ever made because she wishes I would have left her alone. But no, I'm kidding. But the point is, typical dinner. But the point is, we all have decisions we got to make. And the question is, do we make a wise decision or do we don't? And the kings of Israel and the kings of Judah had a lot of decisions to make. And one of the first decisions they had to make was who was their king. If you go back to 1 Kings chapter 1 through chapter 12, we have the unexpected king in the reign of Solomon. The reason I say an unexpected king is because, and we sort of talked about this last week, how God, throughout the scriptures, always he circumvents what we would just think of as common, reasonable, this is the way things work, right? In our culture, in our history, and the way we think of things, it's always the oldest son who gets the spoils, who gets what he's supposed to get. That's even in Jewish culture. If you were the oldest son, you were supposed to get the inheritance. And yet over and over and over again, God passes over that oldest child, that expected person, that you're expecting to get it, and goes to someone else. And he's and it goes back to that thing where God says, you judge by appearance, but I judge by their heart. And God understood who people were. And so we go at the beginning of the book, we have the story of Adonijah, who is the son of David, the oldest son of David who's left. Of course, he had several of his sons die in different situations. And so Adonijah, with the backing of Joab, who is David's general, his chief of staff, and Abiathar, who is one of the priests, he decides he's going to take control. His dad's sick. His dad's dying. Everybody knows David is dying. At this time, David has this young woman who comes in. It says that he doesn't lay with her, but she basically, her whole job is to go lay in bed beside David to keep him warm because he can't regulate his temperature. And so that's what she does. She goes, lays in bed next to David to keep his body warm. He's dying. Everybody knows it. And so in this time of turmoil, Adonijah says, if I'm going to be king, I better take matters into my own hands. And so he does. And as he's doing this, as he's taking control, he distanced himself from people that he thinks aren't going to support him or people that are going to tell him he's doing the wrong thing. People like Nathan, the priest, who confronts David over his sin. Benaiah, who is David's. Benaiah is a man. One of my favorite characters in the Bible is Benaiah, because when Benaiah is one of David's mighty men in the Bible. And does anybody know how the Bible describes Benaiah when it first introduces him? He's over David's private guard, who's like the ones that guard the king. I love this. It says, Benaiah once killed a lion in a pit on a snowy day. That's what it says. He fell down in a pit on a snowy day and with his bare hands killed a lion. I'm like, that's a man's man. I like that dude. That's Benaiah. So Benaiah's like this, he's a dude, right? And then Solomon. He doesn't bring any of those guys there. And so Bathsheba sees this, and so Bathsheba goes and reminds David of the promise that he made, that I'm going to make your son king.
I think if we thought about it, all the people back in those days, if they were here today, we'd be embarrassed by how much more men and women they are than what we are.
Go ahead, I'm listening to you. I've got a piece of paper that got the kings of Israel.
Battle loud on bare hands.
Yeah.
There was much more men and women than what we are today.
Yeah, well, I mean, and plus you got to think, a lot of times they hunted their own food. They had skills we don't have.
And I wonder if in a different culture today, a man in a culture which still is a foraging country, if he still would slay a dragon.
A lion.
You know what I'm trying to say, though. But in America, I got Kroger's. Like, I don't have to.
Yeah.
I don't have to.
I mean, don't get me wrong. It's impressive.
Yeah.
But I'm not going bear hunting without a rifle. I mean, I'm not going with a stick to fight a bear.
There was one thing that I learned that I did not know.
What's that?
The Lord gives Solomon another name.
Yeah, he does have another name. Yeah. But yeah, so basically what happens is Bathsheba goes and reminds David, and then so David anoints Solomon king. Now, we're not going to get into this deep, but what happens is, of course, as soon as the trumpet blows, saying that we have a new king, and all the people that are sitting there with Adonijah are like, uh-oh, David's not quite dead yet. What do they do immediately? They scatter from him and leave him. Now, why do you think they did that? Why did these men? So you've got this weak king, David. You've got all these people that are celebrating Adonijah becoming the new king, quote unquote. But when they hear that horn, they scatter. Why do you think that happened?
David had made Solomon king by letting him through the process of riding out on his own mule and all like that.
Yeah.
He promoted him as king.
Yeah, but my question is this.
And they were afraid.
Why were they
when he
afraid?